Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're fascinated by stories where humans prove they're the ultimate apex predator tamers in the universe, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would do if an alien beast the size of a truck trusted only you to keep it alive. Now let's dive in. The sun on Gara 9 never truly rose. It glowed dimly through the heavy copper-green atmosphere like an old lantern wrapped in moss. Ethan Cole adjusted the seal on his rebreather mask and checked his wrist display for oxygen levels. 93%. Enough for a few more hours of sampling before he'd have to return to the dropship and cycle fresh tanks. The ravine before him yawned wide, its jagged rock walls streaked with mineral-rich veins that shimmered under the haze. Ethan crouched on the loose gravel edge, scraping a fragment of glowing lichen into his specimen vial. The lichen pulsed faintly in his hand, its bioluminescent nodes flickering in rhythm with his quickening pulse. He slipped it into his satchel and surveyed the ravine floor, scanning for movement among the ferns and thorn palms that crowded the cliffsides. He wasn't alone. Movement rippled through the foliage 30 feet below. Ethan narrowed his eyes, his pupils contracting against the filtered glare. Something huge moved through the underbrush, and the leaves shifted as though brushed by a passing storm. A guttural growl rolled up the stone walls, low and resonant, vibrating through Ethan's boots and sinking into his chest like a second heartbeat. He spotted it then, sprawled half-hidden beneath a twisted tree trunk. The creature was easily 10 feet from snout to tail tip, its obsidian-black scales marred by fresh gashes along its flank. Its head resembled a lupin predator's, elongated with a heavy jaw lined in serrated ivory fangs. Curved tusks arched from its lower jaw like scythe blades, and its chest heaved raggedly with each shallow breath. Dark blood pooled beneath its rear leg where muscle tissue had been torn open to the bone. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat clicking dryly against his rebreather valve. He knew what it was. Every field biologist knew. This was the apex predator of Gara 9, the one local sentience called the Doom Howler. Their warning was simple: if you see it, pray it isn't hungry. If you hear it, you're already dead. But the mighty beast was injured. Its golden eyes, slit-pupilled and glassy with fever, tracked him with a resigned wariness rather than aggression. Flies gathered around its wounds, feeding on coagulating blood. Its chest rattled with damp breaths, each exhale misting the humid air. A rustle in the bushes beyond snapped Ethan's attention away. Smaller predators, thin-bodied, six-legged reptiloids with snapping needle jaws, emerged in a tight hunting formation. Their scales blended seamlessly with the undergrowth, flickering chameleon hues as they stalked forward. Their eyes were trained not on Ethan but on the wounded giant. He counted at least 8 of them, each no longer than his thigh, yet moving with ruthless precision. One chittered, a high staccato sound that reverberated through the pack. They surged forward as a unit, crawling over fallen logs and weaving between gnarled roots, their needle teeth bared. Ethan's first instinct was to step back and let nature take its course. The Doom Howler was a killer. It would not mourn him if their positions were reversed. Its species had been known to shred armored exploration rovers like tin cans, dragging the screaming occupants into the shadows for leisurely consumption. He reached for his shock baton anyway. The thought arrived unbidden, cold and clinical. This is wrong. The creature's wounds weren't hunting injuries. They were inflicted by something else, possibly territorial conflict with another Doom Howler or maybe a plasma burn from an orbiting scout ship's defensive sweep. Whatever caused them had left it too weak to stand. Ethan clenched the grip of his baton, flicking the activation switch. Twin arcs of electric blue danced between its tips, humming with lethal promise. The first reptiloid lunged at the Doom Howler's exposed leg. Its needle teeth sank into the torn muscle. The giant beast bellowed weakly, unable to rise, and twisted its head to snap at the attacker. Its jaws closed on empty air. Another reptiloid climbed its shoulder, biting into the thick muscle of its neck. Blood sprayed in a dark arc across the ravine floor. Ethan didn't think. His boots skidded down the gravel embankment as he leapt forward, baton raised. Electricity crackled with each stride. He swung in a tight arc, smashing the baton's tip into the flank of the reptiloid clinging to the Doom Howler's neck. The creature shrieked as its body spasmed under 50,000 volts, flinging it off the predator's shoulder. Its smoking corpse landed in a broken heap among the ferns. The other reptiloids hissed, flicking their forked tongues. 2 sprang at Ethan, jaws wide. He pivoted, driving the baton into the first open mouth. Its body convulsed violently before slumping dead against his leg. He kicked it away and braced as the second attacker leapt for his throat. He slammed his forearm into its jaw, deflecting it just enough to swing the batten under its belly and trigger a surge of electricity that left it twitching and drooling foam onto the mossy ground. The remaining reptiloids hesitated, chittering in agitation. Ethan widened his stance and raised the batten high, electricity arcing blue in the dim haze. One by one they slinked backwards into the underbrush, eyes flashing with fear before disappearing entirely. Breathing heavily, Ethan deactivated the batten and knelt beside the doom howler. Its massive golden eyes rolled towards him. Its fangs were slick with blood, but it made no move to bite. Instead, it let out a rumbling whine from deep within its chest. The sound reminded him uncomfortably of a dog he'd owned as a boy, Rex, an old German shepherd who whimpered the same way when his hips finally gave out. Up close, Ethan could smell the rank heat of its wounds mixed with the ozone tang of his discharged batten. He could see the way its chest rattled with each breath, the trembling of muscles barely clinging to life. It wasn't just dying, it was resigned to death. Ethan rested his gloved hand against the creature's massive brow. Its scales were warm, pulsing faintly with trapped biothermal energy. It did not flinch away. Its golden eyes stared into his, searching for something he didn't understand. "I don't even know if you understand me," he whispered, his voice muffled through his mask. "But I'm not letting you die like this. Not like prey." The doom howler closed its eyes, letting out a long, shuddering exhale. Ethan glanced around, ears straining for any returning threats. The ravine had fallen silent except for the distant chirps of night insects. He exhaled, shoulders loosening just slightly. Above them, hidden among drifting clouds, alien surveillance drones hovered silently, relaying every moment back to the Galactic Council's observation ships in orbit. But Ethan didn't know that. All he knew was the rasping breaths beneath his hand and the way this beast, this supposed killer, was looking at him not with hunger or hate, but with something disturbingly close to hope. He tightened his grip on the shock batten and scanned the ravine walls for an escape route, his mind already racing through medical protocols, thermal dressings and rations. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing with certainty. He could not walk away from this creature and call himself human ever again. He rose slowly, eyes locked on the predator's golden gaze. For the first time since landing on Gara 9, Ethan Cole felt the faint flicker of purpose. Something beyond data collection or sterile mission logs. Something deeper, primal and inexplicably warm in his chest. He turned back towards his gear pack, unaware that above the moss-choked cliffs, countless alien eyes watched his every move, trying to decipher the one enigma they could never calculate: human compassion. And the doom howler watched him too, its tail twitching weakly against the ground, its massive jaws parting just enough to release a quiet, rumbling sigh that no other living being had ever heard without screaming. Ethan worked in silence, his fingers moving with calm precision despite the pulse thrumming against his throat. He gathered fallen branches, twisted dry moss into kindling, and arranged them under his portable burner. A flick of his thumb sparked the ignition. Pale blue flame licked the moss, releasing thin tendrils of smoke that curled through the copper-green air before dissipating into the endless haze above. He glanced back at the predator. Its golden eyes tracked his every movement, unblinking and strangely lucid despite the blood loss. The massive chest still heaved shallowly, each breath rattling deep within the barrel of its ribcage. Dried blood crusted along the wounds on its flank, attracting thick black flies that hovered lazily above the congealed pools. Its tusks, caked in dirt and froth, remained half-bared in a grimace of exhaustion. Ethan set his titanium pan onto the burner and retrieved a vacuum-sealed protein ration from his satchel. The ration was bland by human standards. Compressed insect protein laced with fortified amino gels, designed to keep a man alive on minimal supplies for weeks. He peeled back the wrapper, sliced off a thick slab and set it sizzling in the pan. The aroma of charred synthetic fat mingled with the faint floral scent of moss and damp iron drifting from the predator's wounds. He caught himself staring at the creature's face, at the powerful ridge of bone across its brow, at the long ears splayed flat against its skull in submission or perhaps pain. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. A deep, rumbling whine vibrated from its chest, quiet but unmistakable. Ethan's throat tightened. Hunger. It was the universal language of life. He remembered his first deployment with Planetary Wildlife Rescue, nearly 12 years ago. A jaguar on Earth, half-starved and trapped in a poacher's snare, had snarled at him through foam-flecked teeth until he tossed it a strip of dried rabbit meat. The snarl had died on its lips, replaced by a low rumble of surprise. That was the day Ethan learned food could override fear and pain. That was the day he stopped being afraid of predators and started trying to understand them. He flipped the ration in the pan. Fat sizzled against hot titanium, sending up an aroma that made his empty stomach cramp. He ignored the pang and sliced the cooked ration into thumb-sized pieces. Gripping a chunk between his fingers, he rose from the burner and took 3 slow steps toward the creature. Its eyes narrowed. A growl rippled through its throat, weak but warning. Ethan crouched just out of reach, arm extended, palm open. The meat's oily surface glistened in the half-light. For a long moment nothing moved. Then, with painful slowness, the predator shifted its massive head forward, nostrils flaring. Its breath washed over Ethan's hand, hot and metallic with decay. Its tongue, rough as coarse sandpaper, flicked against his gloved fingers, tasting the offered morsel. The growl faded into a rumbling purr. The predator's jaws parted just wide enough to reveal the forest of fangs within, and its tongue curled around the ration chunk, dragging it into its mouth. Its throat worked in a convulsive swallow, and for the first time since Ethan had seen it, the golden eyes closed, a shudder of relief passing through its enormous frame. Ethan exhaled shakily, only then realizing he had been holding his breath. His fingers trembled as he reached for another chunk of ration. This time the predator did not growl. It shifted forward slightly, resting its massive head against the gravel-strewn earth, jaws half open in exhausted anticipation. Ethan placed the second piece between its teeth. It chewed slowly, saliva mixing with blood as its tusks scraped against each other in rhythmic motion. He fed it piece by piece until the ration was gone. Its breaths deepened, each exhale whistling through its blood-caked nostrils. The predator's golden eyes opened again, fixing on Ethan with an intensity that made his skin prickle beneath his suit. There was no hatred there. No hunger either. Only something akin to curiosity, or perhaps the dim flicker of hope. He rose, his knees popping from the crouched strain. The sun dipped further behind the ravine walls, painting the haze in bruised greens and copper shadows. Night approached quickly on Gara 9. Ethan gathered the remaining ration packs from his satchel and set them beside the portable burner. He knew he would need them soon, and so would his patient. A shiver prickled his spine as wind whispered down the ravine, rustling the ferns with a sound like skeletal fingers brushing stone. He scanned the cliffs above, searching for movement, for the glint of predator eyes or the glimmer of a drone's metallic casing. Nothing. Only drifting spores catching the last of the dying light. He turned back to the creature. Its gaze followed him with unwavering focus. Slowly, it shifted its tail, dragging the thick, scaled limb to curl protectively over its hindquarters. The gesture struck Ethan as oddly childlike. He wondered, not for the first time, what it felt like to be an apex predator brought to the edge of death, whether fear overcame dignity or if dignity even mattered to such a beast at all. He crouched again, this time reaching out to lay a gloved hand against its brow. The scales were warm under his touch, trembling faintly with each rapid pulse that thudded beneath. The predator made a low sound, somewhere between a whimper and a sigh, and closed its eyes once more. A faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "Easy, big guy," he whispered. "You're not dying tonight." He sat beside it as darkness closed in, the burner's pale blue flame flickering against the high ravine walls. The night chorus rose, shrill insect trills, the distant roars of territorial predators, the hiss of water dripping through moss-choked fissures. Ethan leaned against his pack, eyes half-lidded, listening to the predator's breathing. Each inhalation was a little deeper now, a little stronger. Sleep tugged at his senses, but he forced his mind to remain alert, reviewing emergency triage protocols in his head. He would need to clean its wounds at first light. He would need to keep it fed, hydrated, stabilized until either help arrived or it recovered enough to move on its own. And through it all, he would need to pray that no rival predators caught their scent in the night. A tremor shook the ground beneath him, almost imperceptible. The predator's ear flicked. Ethan frowned, tilting his head to listen. The tremor came again, rhythmic, heavy footfalls echoing through the ravine like distant drums. The predator's golden eyes opened wide, pupils narrowing to razor slits. Its chest rumbled with a growl, weak but defiant. Ethan reached for his baton, thumb resting lightly on the activation switch. His pulse quickened, sweat dampening the collar of his undersuit. Whatever approached was large. Very large. And it was coming straight towards them. The predator's gaze shifted from the darkness beyond to Ethan's face. Its lips drew back over serrated fangs, and for a moment he thought it might bite him out of fear or desperation. But then it did something he never expected. It lifted its massive head and rested its snout against his thigh, pressing the bone ridge of its brow into his leg with surprising gentleness. He froze, feeling the warm exhale of its breath through his suit. Its tail curled tighter around its flank, claws digging shallow furrows in the gravel. Its eyes never left his face. In that moment, with night rising around them and doom approaching on silent feet, Ethan realized what the creature was doing. It wasn't hiding behind him. It was shielding him. His chest tightened painfully. He pressed his palm to its massive brow, feeling the tremble of muscles burning with adrenaline and pain. The approaching footsteps grew louder, vibrating through the ground into Ethan's bones. He swallowed hard, staring into the darkness beyond the burner's flickering glow. He did not know if either of them would survive the night. But as he felt the predator's trembling body pressed against him, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer alone. Above the drifting clouds of Gara 9, hidden beyond the reach of predator roars and human whispers, a silent craft hovered in geostationary orbit. Its hull glimmered with the matte black of stealth alloys, absorbing the copper-green light radiating from the atmosphere below. Within its command chamber, 3 figures stood before a curved holographic display, the projection flickering with live footage from the ravine's surveillance drones. Commander Razvok clicked his forked tongue in irritation. His scales rippled dark bronze under the chamber's dim lighting, ridges along his skull flaring with restless tension. He leaned forward, reptilian eyes narrowing at the image of Ethan and the wounded predator pressed together under flickering flame light. "This is illogical," he hissed, his voice echoing through the quiet chamber. "The Doom Howler feeds upon any living creature it can overpower. The human's actions defy every known behavioral model. It should have torn out his throat the moment he approached." Beside him, Analyst Jurek shuffled his glossy black feathers, tapping clawed fingertips against his data tablet. His hooked beak clicked softly as he adjusted the footage, rewinding the feed to observe Ethan tossing the first ration chunk. "It is not entirely illogical, Commander," Jurek croaked. The human displayed feeding gestures consistent with early kin-bonding rituals among Ctherian tamer castes. Food is the universal bridge between aggression and trust. Commander Razvok's golden eyes flicked toward him with a silent snarl. The Ctherians tamed animals bred for subservience. He jabbed a claw at the display, highlighting the massive predator curled protectively around Ethan's leg, "is an apex deathworld hunter. There is no taming it." At the back of the chamber, Admiral Vasek remained silent, his multifaceted eyes flickering as he absorbed every data stream. His chitinous limbs clicked softly against each other in thought. The Admiral's massive thorax rose and fell with measured calm as he finally spoke, his voice a soft metallic buzz. "Both of you are correct. And both of you are limited by your species' experiential biases." His words silenced the chamber. Vasek extended an articulated limb, expanding the holographic feed to display Ethan's vitals alongside the predator's faint thermal profile. "Observe his cortisol levels. Elevated but stable. His strategic decisions indicate no panic. He is not simply feeding it out of fear. He is forging a bond, but not for control. For protection." Commander Razvok's nostrils flared with disdain. "Protection? From what?" "His kindness will be his doom when its strength returns." "Perhaps," Vasek hummed, tilting his triangular head, "or perhaps the Doom Howler's psychological schema is not fully understood. The Council has classified this species as a lone territorial killer with no social structure. That assumption may have been incorrect." Jurek tapped a sharp talon against the projected heart rate monitor of the predator. Its stress levels decline with each feeding. Its defensive posturing has shifted to shielding behaviors. It perceives him as a cub. The silence that followed was heavy with recalculating minds. Commander Razvok flexed his clawed hands before folding them behind his back, his tail lashing once against the steel deck. "Implications?" he growled. Vasek expanded the data feeds to reveal other surveillance footage of Gara 9. Herds of horned grazers migrating along sulfur plains, flocks of razorbeak flyers spiraling above fungal forests, packs of lesser predators scurrying through ravines. None challenged the Doom Howlers. They were the undisputed masters of the planet. Now, footage showed one pressed against a human like a devoted guardian. "The implications," Vasek clicked softly, "are profound. If humans can bond with apex species, their utility as planetary integration assets increases exponentially. Imagine Deathworld colonization protected by native apex guardians. Imagine tactical deployments where humans infiltrate hostile ecosystems not as invaders, but as bonded kin to the top predators." Razvok hissed in quiet astonishment. "Weaponized compassion." "Not weaponized," Jurek corrected, his feathers fluffing with curiosity. "Harnessed. Directed. This human does not see himself as dominant. He sees himself as responsible. For a long moment, they watched as Ethan stroked the predator's massive brow, his lips moving silently under his rebreather mask. The doom howler's golden eyes blinked with heavy slowness, its entire body shuddering as it leaned into the human's touch. Each flick of its tail stirred dust into the flame-lit air, curling around Ethan's boots in exhausted comfort. "Do we intervene?" Razvok rasped. "Retrieve the specimen for behavioral dissection and neural mapping before it recovers." "No," Vasik's voice rang with quiet finality. His compound eyes shimmered with subtle shifts in color as he observed Ethan's expression. Calm, resolute, tinged with worry but free of fear. "We observe. We learn. And if the bond persists, we propose an integration program. Voluntary, of course." Razvok spat a curse under his breath, but did not argue further. Jurek flicked his talons over his tablet, tagging the footage with multiple priority markers and adaptive protocol proposals. Beyond the chamber's reinforced windows, distant stars glowed against the abyss, their ancient light indifferent to the dramas unfolding on the death world below. On the ravine floor, Ethan shifted slightly, careful not to dislodge the predator's head from his thigh. His eyes darted towards the darkness beyond the burner flame. Heavy footfalls echoed down the stone walls, drawing closer with each ponderous stride. The predator rumbled a warning growl, low and gravelly, though its body trembled with fatigue. Ethan gripped his shock baton, thumb poised over the activation switch. The approaching creature emerged from the darkness, an immense silhouette that resolved into another doom howler, this one uninjured, its obsidian scales polished and unscarred. Its eyes glowed with predatory confidence, and its fangs dripped clear saliva that hissed softly when it splattered onto the moss-covered gravel. It stopped 10 feet away, head lowered, ears pinned flat. The wounded predator at Ethan's side raised its own head and issued a rumbling growl, though it shook with the effort. The newcomer snarled back, a deep-chested roar that made the burner flame flicker and sent vibrations crawling up Ethan's spine. For a heartbeat, Ethan saw his own death reflected in those golden eyes. He tightened his grip on the baton and shifted his stance, placing himself between the two creatures. The uninjured doom howler's snarl faltered. Its gaze flicked from Ethan's face to the massive predator curled around his legs. It chuffed, a sharp exhale of breath, and took a single step backward. Ethan felt the tension in the wounded predator's body ease, if only slightly. It let out a low, throaty growl, not a threat but a command. The uninjured creature rumbled in answer before turning and slinking back into the shadows, its tail lashing once before vanishing entirely. Silence returned to the ravine, broken only by the crackling burner flame and the predator's ragged breathing. Ethan swallowed, his throat dry despite the humid air. He reached down and rested his hand on the creature's massive brow once more. Its golden eyes fluttered closed at his touch, its entire body sinking into the gravel with exhausted relief. Above them, in the orbital chamber, the three observers watched in silent awe. "This changes everything," Jurek whispered. "No," Vasik said quietly. "This changes humans. And by extension, us all." Commander Razvok said nothing. His golden eyes remained locked on the human kneeling in darkness, stroking the brow of a monster that now saw him as kin. Dawn came in silence, the dim green light of Garaix's sun filtering through drifting spores and mist that clung to the ravine like a funeral shroud. Ethan's eyes opened before the first rays breached the cliffs. His entire body ached from sleeping upright against his gear pack, but his mind snapped instantly to awareness as his senses registered warmth pressed against his leg. The doom howler's head still rested there, heavier than stone yet strangely comforting in its gentle weight. Its breaths were deeper now, each exhale rolling over his suit in waves of damp heat. It shifted slightly, blinking golden eyes that glowed faintly under the moss-filtered dawn. The wounds on its flanks still oozed dark blood, but the flow had slowed to sluggish dribbles, drying black against obsidian scales. Ethan rubbed sleep grit from his eyes and stretched his cramped shoulders. The creature watched every movement, its pupils narrowing with feline focus. For a moment, neither moved. Then the predator lowered its head fully to the ground and let out a sound so soft Ethan almost missed it. A low whine pitched somewhere between gratitude and resignation. He reached into his satchel and retrieved another protein ration. Peeling back the wrapper, he sliced it into broad strips and fed the creature slowly, careful to keep his gloved fingers flat against his palms so its fangs wouldn't catch them. Its tongue rasped against his hand, rough as sanded stone, and each swallow sent a visible shudder down its muscular throat. When the ration was gone, Ethan wiped his fingers on his trouser leg and leaned back to study the doom howler's wounds. Infection was setting in, streaks of dark purple threaded through the torn flesh of its rear leg, and its blood smelled acrid and rotten. He rummaged through his kit, withdrawing a small canister of antibiotic foam. As he approached with it, the predator snarled weakly, ears flattening against its skull. "Easy," Ethan murmured, his voice firm yet gentle. "I know it stings." He sprayed the foam directly into the wounds. The doom howler roared in pain, its tail lashing wildly, claws raking gouges into the gravel. Ethan fell back onto his elbows as dust clouded the narrow clearing. When it settled, he saw the predator's massive head lowered, teeth bared, golden eyes locked onto his face with fury. But it did not attack. Instead, it exhaled a deep, rattling sigh and collapsed fully onto its side, its entire body trembling from pain and fever. Ethan crawled forward and rested his palm against its brow again, feeling heat radiating off the scales and rolling waves. "Hang in there," he whispered. "I'm not letting you go without a fight." A sound rolled through the ravine then, a guttural snarl so deep it made the gravel dance across the earth. Ethan froze, his hand still pressed to the predator's head. From the treeline ahead, branches snapped and splintered as something massive forced its way through dense foliage. The doom howler struggled to rise, planting its claws against the ground, but its injured leg buckled instantly. It collapsed with a pained roar that echoed off the stone walls. Ethan rose to his feet and stepped in front of it, shock baton gripped tightly, electricity crackling blue against the green haze. The rival appeared from the shadows. Another doom howler, slightly smaller but uninjured, its obsidian scales gleaming like oiled armor beneath the dawn. Its golden eyes flicked from Ethan to the wounded predator and back again. Saliva dripped from its tusks as it let out a long rolling growl. Ethan's pulse thudded against his ribs like a war drum. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to flee into the ravine's depths and abandon the creature behind him. But he stood firm, raising the shock baton higher, ignoring the tremor in his wrist. The rival predator snarled and lunged forward, claws ripping into moss and stone. The wounded doom howler roared back, forcing itself upright despite its injuries, placing its massive body directly in front of Ethan. Blood poured down its leg as it staggered forward, each breath coming in ragged, thunderous gasps. The uninjured rival circled, jaws gaping wide, aiming for the throat. The wounded predator snapped back with surprising speed, sinking its fangs into the rival's snout. Blood sprayed across the moss as it tore away a strip of scaled flesh. The rival howled in pain and reared back, slamming its claws into the wounded creature's shoulder. The doom howler stumbled, nearly collapsing, but twisted its head and clamped its jaws around the rival's forearm. Bones crunched under its bite. Ethan darted forward, shock baton crackling, and rammed it against the rival's exposed ribs. Electricity surged into its torso, making its muscles seize and lock. The predator roared in agony, turning its wrath onto Ethan with a swipe of its massive paw. He barely leapt back in time, feeling claws rip through the air inches from his chest plate. The wounded doom howler surged forward with every ounce of strength remaining, slamming its body into the rival's side and driving it into a jagged rock outcrop. The rival screamed as shards of stone impaled its belly, blood spilling across the gravel in steaming rivulets. They grappled like titans, scales scraping against scales, teeth flashing in lethal arcs. The doom howler's injured leg gave out again, but it locked its jaws onto the rival's throat and refused to release. The rival thrashed violently, claws tearing bloody furrows down its attacker's shoulders, but the wounded predator held firm, forcing its jaws deeper, crushing windpipe and vertebrae with a final, monstrous crunch. The rival's body shuddered once and went limp, blood dripping from its slack jaws. The wounded doom howler released its grip and staggered backwards, panting heavily. It turned its head to Ethan, golden eyes unfocused and dim with pain. Its massive body swayed on trembling legs before collapsing onto its side with a heavy, final thud. Ethan dropped to his knees beside it, breath ragged in his throat. He reached out and laid a hand on its brow. The predator's chest rose and fell in shallow rasps, each breath bubbling faintly with blood. Its golden eyes opened one last time, locking onto Ethan's face with a look that carried no feral hunger, no territorial fury. Only weary relief. Its tail curled weakly around his leg, a protective gesture even as its life drained away. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes as he leaned down, pressing his forehead gently to the creature's scaled snout. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You kept me safe." The predator rumbled softly, the faintest echo of a purr vibrating through its chest. Its eyes flickered once, twice, then slowly closed. Its chest rose for a final, rattling in hail before falling silent. Ethan remained there, kneeling in the moss-choked gravel, feeling the creature's warmth slowly fade beneath his palm. He did not know how long he stayed like that. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed irrelevant under the copper dawn. Above the ravine, hidden drones recorded every second, transmitting live feeds back to the Galactic Council's observation chamber. Commander Razvok stood with arms folded, his golden eyes narrow and unreadable. Analyst Jurek's feathers lay flat against his skull in stunned silence. Admiral Vasek observed the footage with subtle shifts of his multifaceted gaze, each flicker recording and analyzing every micro-expression, every chemical reading. Finally Vasek spoke, his voice a quiet, metallic buzz that filled the silent chamber. He chose to stay. Even knowing it could never benefit him. Even knowing the outcome. Jurek nodded, his claws tapping gently against his data tablet. He saw a killer. And chose to see a companion instead. Commander Razvok snorted softly, baring sharp fangs in what might have been a grudging smile. Humans? Dangerous because they fear nothing. Unstoppable because they care about everything. Below them, Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his gloved hand. He rose slowly, looking down at the fallen predator. Its massive body lay twisted in death, but its face was peaceful, fangs bared in what almost seemed like a final, silent grin. He whispered a promise into the morning air, his voice trembling with exhausted certainty. I won't let them forget you. Then he turned toward the rising sun, shock baton clipped to his belt, each step carrying him deeper into the death world that had revealed a truth the galaxy had long forgotten, that compassion could be the fiercest weapon of all. And far above, the council watched the lone human stride into the mist-shrouded dawn, silent and thoughtful, each of them wondering if they had just witnessed the beginning of a force no empire could ever hope to contain.